The US myth got busted, right? People started asking themselves, why am I sending my kid? My child doesn't have to do a one size fits all kind of an approach. My child go and still spend 3 more years exploring themselves. We've taken away that pressure from our children and the education of them getting a job abroad. And the minute that's happened, parents are open to the idea of looking at other universities across the globe. For parents to look at rankings, sometimes I feel like it just comes from that helplessness of saying, I don't know better. So I'll hang on to anything that the world can give me to feel more confident in this decision making as I guide my child. Parents are coming to us in nursery and grade 1 and saying, what board should my child do so that they get into Harvard? If your child is studying 18 hours a day, what are they going to do at Harvard anyway but study? Your kid is escaping you. And the harder you are on your kid, the more they will escape you and their reality. If you have a life you want to live, you will not turn to your device. We are not allowing our children to be creatively intelligent. We are not allowing them to be critical thinkers. We're also not allowing them to fail. The person got 0 job offers out of those 45. But they were not shy of doing it again. You'll never know what you're good at until you've been out there and really gone through the grind into some other activities and see what you enjoy.
Welcome back. This is part 2 of our conversation with Tripti Singh, educational psychologist, counselor, and head of postgraduate admission services at the Red Pen. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, I'd encourage you to start there. You'll hear what drew Tripti to psychology, the lesser known career paths a psychology degree can open up, and her honest take on AI and mental health. The link to part 1 is in the description below. In this episode, we're talking about study abroad, the changing landscape of global higher education, and how to make one of the most important and expensive decisions a family will ever make. Whether you're a student, a parent, or just curious about where education is heading, this one is for you. Tripti, Red Pen is an independent education counseling company that helps applicants plan their journey at school, colleges, or postgrad level. Now, through your work at the Red Pen, you've guided thousands of students applying to universities all across the world.
Wow.
How has the study abroad landscape actually changed over the last decade in terms of where students want to go to study? And so that's one part. And what are families weighing more these days?
Okay. Naida, can I get a little controversial here?
Please.
Okay. Look, a decade in India has passed really fast when we talk about education and the steep rise of educational systems. Okay. Exactly at this onset of that decade, people were just opening up to the idea that my child in high school doesn't have to be married to only commerce or only science or only arts. There are options out there. And what validates that? All these new liberal arts universities that have been dumped. Ashoka, Kriya, Shivnadar, Bennett, these are the starting big ones. So they've been just dumped into our landscape. So therefore now suddenly my child doesn't have to do a one size fits all kind of an approach. My child go and still spend 3 more years exploring themselves. Right? As that was happening, suddenly I feel like tier 3, tier 2 city students started getting aspirational about going to these really cool, very infrastructure rich and very diverse liberal arts colleges and staying away from home. So if I'm from a Ranchi or if I'm from a Jodhpur or if I'm from a Kochi, I'm now going to a bigger city and I'm living there on campus. And it doesn't have to be a state-run university. It could be this much cooler state-of-the-art infrastructure. There's vibe, there's athletics, there's a lot of stuff happening.
Meeting people from different parts of the country or wherever.
And suddenly my grades are getting me there, but I also have to write an essay. But so it's a very new age, appealing to the young generation kind of an application process. And the minute tier 2, tier 3 city university students started aspiring for this, the tier 1 and the tier 1.1 city state kids and parents were like, Okay, so these kids are feeding into these universities. Where will my kid go? Suddenly going abroad became a thing. It wasn't that big a thing earlier, right? It's almost like, well, if you're going to do this, I need to do better. That's how I'm looking at it as an observer of the last decade. Now, what happened was COVID happened. Then all these parents who for the 3 years had built their psyche when their kid went into high school saying, we will send abroad, we will send abroad, we have the finances, we will send abroad. They told the kids, sorry, you cannot go abroad, my friend. There is no flight, there is no option. You might never come make it home, we don't know. Now these kids also fed into the same liberal arts systems that these tier 2, tier 3 kids were coming into, right? Now, this batch has now just recently started graduating, right? This pure diversity of tier 1, 1.1, tier 2, tier 3 kids, right? So it actually gives these campuses a really good leg to stand on because it truly had diversity, right? But now the tier 1, tier 1.1 are like, well, I was going to go for my undergrad. I didn't go for my undergrad. So now I'm going to go for my master's, right? But here is a geopolitical situation that is making it really hard for me to go abroad for my master's. So I don't know what to do. And the anxiety is very high, either. Very highly anxious cohort that are passing out the last 2 years, right? Job security is not as high because the kind of money that is being offered to them with the kind of aspirations they had for themselves, there's a complete mismatch.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas if we look at those tier 2, tier 3 students who went in and they also wanted to do masters, but they don't have the funds to go to just to a Columbia and do it. They're like, well, just wait it out for a couple of years. I'll work wherever and then I'll go for my masters. Are actually very comfortable with that adaptable pivot that they've had to do. Saying, I don't have to do a master's right away. I'm getting a placement out of Ashoka, out of Plaksha, out of Kriya. So I'm going to take that and then I'm going to see when I want to go for my master's. So we now have a generation that is slightly frustrated because they're like, I don't belong, but I don't know where I belong. And another one that is like, hey, I don't even know if I will get a master's. I'm just working right now and I'm doing decently well. And I'm from a tier 2, tier 3 city. So it's not
So
like
this is,
save or anything.
yes, correct. So, and also this is like a big thing. It's a big change. It's a big shift. You know, you're going back home, you're in another city, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So now this is on the higher ed space that has happened. What's happened in the high school space? You know how we say rich are getting rich and the poor are getting poorer? The competition is just getting more competition. The competition is competing with itself, right? Parents are coming to us in nursery and grade 1 and saying, what board should my child do? So that they get into Harvard, right? And it's a great question, but I would love to first counsel the parent on what are your expectations out of your child? Like what's going on here? Like it's a great question. Give me an insight into the fear that you're living with as a parent.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I deal with this all the time. I feel like I have to talk to the parents more so. And you would think that the parents are approximately in an age group between 40 to 60. So you would think that there is a little bit more awareness, a little bit more empathy coming in. But I'm with you on this completely.
Like when I hear about CBSE, ICSE results, everybody's getting a 98, 99%. I'm like, the kids are going to tuition classes after school. So 8 hours of school, 5 hours of tuitions. If your child needs to study 12 to 15 hours a day to just get a 98%, your child doesn't have any skills but rote learning.
Yeah. Which we were trying to move away from.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly my point. Now, IB kids are getting tuitions. And I'm like, the IB was built for skills. Why does your child need tuitions for skills? Like, for me, that in itself is such an oxymoron of a thought. And it's like if your child is doing the A levels, Cambridge 11th, 12th, and they are needing tuitions for math, advanced math, they don't need to do advanced math. They can do international math. Oh, but my child will not get into Harvard. But that's okay because if your child is studying 18 hours a day, what are they going to do at Harvard anyway but study? They don't know how else to be but study. What are they going to do at Harvard? So there is We've gone from a generation of parenting which was, let my child be. They will figure it out. As long as the exam ka results aa jaye, I don't care what else you do in the day. To now saying, my child needs a class every day, every minute. My child cannot be free because I have the funds and I'm going to fund their extracurriculars or co-curriculars or tutoring. But we are not allowing our children to be creatively intelligent. We're not allowing them to be critical thinkers. We're also not allowing them to fail, neither. We're just not allowing them to fail. And this is the concern because the parenting is going wrong, to be honest. Again, these liberal arts colleges started with so much shosha about well-rounded. We are going to be extracurricular,
Yeah, the holistic
Thank you. I
education.
use
Yes.
abused word in education. The holistic
Mm.
education system. What are they doing? They're still taking 95, 98, 97% upwards.
Yeah.
What's going on? Right? What's going on? Why is India so obsessed with 95% plus? I don't get it. I don't get it. And I want to tell the parents that you all really need to understand that your child is going to go through a world of mental pain if you do not learn to back off and just allow them to be themselves. All of this mobile phoning, right? That people are like going crazy about. Parents are like, I need to get my kid off this.
Screen. Yeah.
Your kid is escaping you. And the harder you are on your kid, the more they will escape you and their reality. Make their reality fun. Make their reality exciting. Make their reality livable, where they don't feel like escaping from it. And then the screen time will automatically come down. If you have a life you want to live, you will not turn to your device.
Yeah. I'm just kind of understanding a little bit about our kids. And you've addressed that question, looking at going and studying abroad. And this concept of studying abroad, I'm going to just merge it into the next question. The concept of studying abroad is, I think there was this, I want to go to the US to study. Abroad meant US. Okay. You didn't have any other abroad in that time. UK was, oh, wow, you're going to the UK to study. That means, you got into a really elite. I don't think there were conversations. This was just, I think, very few people would go to London to study, but yeah, you would be like, oh, wow, that's interesting because you just thought of it as that.
Correct.
I think Europe was very vague. Hey, have you learned a language? That's why you're going? Are you like an exchange student or a program or something like that? Forget the East. Australia was most of, are you settling down in Australia and New Zealand? And that's why you're planning to go? Conversations still hovered around, okay, I might study in Australia, but very few. But I feel over the last maybe the 2-3 years, I'm not even saying 5, 2-3 years, I've been noticing there's a serious consideration or a talk. And I myself am doing a little reading and, watching counselors like you all talking about it. And I think there's an interesting shift that the choice of universities in Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, Japan, UAE, and not just US, UK, maybe Europe, because also they're opening up the English language curriculum. I mean, they're opening up that. But what's driving that shift? Are Asian universities genuinely a strong option or like still a backup plan? Because, Singapore was like, okay, yeah, they've studied their graduation. Now they can do their masters in Singapore in maybe, a place like that. Is there a shift, and are you noticing a shift and what's happening in that space?
Yeah. So let me think. I think there are 3 key elements to touch upon here, Naida. One is very, very strongly what's also happening is parents are like, well, US was expensive, Europe is cheaper, Singapore is cheaper, Hong Kong is cheaper. Suddenly it's acceptable in society to say my child is going to Europe because US is so unsafe. So the financial disparity is more palatable now. A parent can say, I can spend 12 lakhs a year in France. I don't have to spend 56 lakhs a year and get admitted without anybody saying he's being cheap. Or do they not have the funds? They're not sending the kid to the US. Okay. So that is very strongly happening as well. The parent is just using the global acceptance of studying in other countries as their ticket to saying, well, I'll save this money and I'll spend it for the masters. I don't have to pacify my society or my community by only sending the kid to the US. The second thing is happening that suddenly that facade of, oh, my child will study in the US, get a job, is suddenly lifted, right? It's like, oh, my kid could go to Columbia and not get a job. My kid could be at London School of Economics and not get a job, right? Oxford grads might take time to land a job. So suddenly that facade has lifted so fast that then the parents are really sitting back and thinking, then why do I send my kid abroad, right? And if the answer to that question, Naida, is that, well, because my child wants to study, say, neuroscience, or my child wants to study psychology, and we can afford to send them to some of the finest institutions in the world for psychology, we are not really pinning hopes of getting a job on top of it. Okay. Suddenly, when they remove that rider and they start asking themselves sensible, logical reasons and questions as to why am I sending my kid abroad to study, now the world is your oyster. Then they start asking ChatGPT or a counselor, depending on how they want to do it, which are the top universities in the world to study psychology. Promptly, Melbourne will come into the list. Promptly, NUS is on there for Singapore, right? Amsterdam, 100% for psychology is a great fit. Bath in the UK, phenomenal psych faculty. So now the parents are like, oh, okay, so I am sending my child to a place for strong studies in psychology or a strong business school program or a strong foundation in neurosciences. So because the US myth got busted, right? The reality was so naked in front of everybody that people started asking themselves, why am I sending my kid abroad? Like, I'm in the same boat. I live internationally. My son has been thinking about doing engineering, and he's never going to make it in India as an engineer. He doesn't have 18 hours a day study rigor.
Yeah.
He doesn't have it. And thank God for that. Like, he has other things that really bring him joy in life besides just doing mechanical. And he wants to work with manufacturing. He wants to manufacture cars and aeroplanes. So we as a family are like, well, where are the regions where he could get those exposures? Airbus. So we're looking at France. Boeing. So we're looking at the US. Because Boeing is in Seattle area, we're looking specifically at that area. We're looking at Comac because it's in China, which is one of the biggest upcoming airline manufacturing. So we're aligning it to saying, okay, you really want to be on the factory floor. So let's get you some opportunities which will convert like that, versus thinking about, well, he has to go to the US. That's the only way I, as an educational counselor, can keep my head flying high. And no, that's just not fair. That's not fair to my child. That's not fair to us. But also, most importantly, it's not fair to the hardworking money that we saved up for our children's education. Right? Now, if my child was a very strong tester, very good at test taking, maybe I would get them to sit for Indian entrance exams, because India also does very well. But he's not. And so I have to align my decision to my child's personality. Having said that, if my child was an econ kid, I would send them to India hands down to study economics. India does economics well in the undergrad, as do other countries, but India also does economics very well. So why would I not send my child to one of the leading economic institutes in India, while I'm also considering other economic institutes around the globe? So to answer your question, we've taken away that pressure from our children and the education of them getting a job abroad. And the minute that's happened, parents are open to the idea of looking at other universities across the globe.
Yeah, I think the most common scenario in India right now is completing and this is what I'm hearing, and this is what I feel like a lot of people are coming to me from friends, colleagues, and from the students' parents, is that यहाँ पे we will do the undergrad degree. Let them finish the undergrad degree in India.
Yeah.
And then we'll pursue the master. So whether it's the tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, because I am working with all the 1, 2, and 3, is that let them just finish their undergrad, because abhi to they don't even know what they want to do really.
Yeah.
So let them just do whatever undergrad.
Yeah.
Maybe BBA, because apparently that's everybody seems to be doing that, and then they'll figure out masters. Is that actually a smart pathway? I mean, in your opinion, I'm not asking what the masses. Is that like a smart pathway, or does it come with disadvantages that people don't anticipate, that doing your undergrad here and then masters? Or is there a right and wrong at all in this kind of a situation?
Right. Neither. There is a right and wrong only to the extent of financial affordability. First, a parent should, and I'm talking to all parents out there, do not feel the pressure to provide for your child an environment that you might have to take a mortgage for, or you might have to compromise on your savings for. It's just not needed, right? Kids grow up. They will find their path regardless of what you provide, what you don't, right? Now, if I had to work neither with the assumption that I am as a family able to afford a certain amount of expenses per year for my child's undergrad, okay, and the world is my oyster in that sense, I am open to other countries. Letting your child step out of the comfort zone of being in an environment which is homogeneous to a very large extent. India is diversity, but it's also homogeneous. Like, if a child going from Chennai to Delhi can get a culture shock, now imagine this child studying at one of the Sky universities in South Korea, right? The level of international mindedness or global mindedness will be unparalleled, correct? So if you are able to provide for your child an opportunity to step out of their comfort zone, but also be in an environment that provides them that very high acumen understanding of a subject. Because remember, this is the place where your child has to explore, expose, and fail. It has to be that safe place to do all of this. So there are institutions around the globe where, even if you're looking at BBA, say you're looking at a marketing specialization within BBA, okay, and you're not studying at a Bocconi, right? You're not at the forefront of what marketing really means in the retail industry. An Indian BBA with a marketing specialization cannot replicate that experience, the exposure, the faculty coming in from the industry, your opportunity to be a part of certain marketing campaigns as interns, as internships throughout the summers. Those opportunities cannot be replicated. Neither can the theoretical gyan, because somehow neither we are not really good or advanced in our research, educational or academic research. Our PhDs are not dishing out path-breaking, innovation, disruptive research. So when we are studying even psych, for example, we only studied US textbooks, correct? And then I look at some of those textbooks now, they're still using the same textbooks from 24 years ago. Whereas there is so much more research that has gone into each one of those fields. So if you're studying psych and you're not in a university where there is faculty whose textbooks you are going to be reading, right? Or the research that is being conducted, or the labs, the opportunity to become a teaching assistant or a research assistant in a lab that is actually conducting real-time research, then you're not really being able to build those core skills compared to a peer who has those access points. So does it add value to consider studying in a place where that subject is really taught well, regardless of where it is in the globe? Yes, it matters. It matters to expose yourself and step out of your comfort zone in another country with another language and another set of diverse humans that you grow up with, studying something which is state of the art at that institution.
Yes.
Does it make sense to do it at the cost of somebody's mental health or financial health or whatever? No, not at all. Please realize that the whole point of having children is to let them grow. And if they have to go through another hurdle till they grow up a little more, that's fine as well. It doesn't have to happen at the cost of somebody taking a loan or something.
Yeah, I think it's also just because of so much uncertainty in general with all the big words like AI, global sustainability, climate change, and so on. It's important to have that mindset as parent. Let them kind of fail, let them, and pick them up when they failed.
Exactly.
You
Pick
know.
them up when they fail. Another very important point of perspective to share here is the emotional intelligence of your child, right? And I'm talking specifically because we're talking about the undergrad
Yes.
landscape. Not every child has the emotional bandwidth to be able to stay and thrive outside of the home environment. And parents are the best point of reference on that, right? I can opine as a study abroad counselor saying, hey, go to Australia, you'll do fine. But you would know neither how sensitive your child is to the concept of home, for example. And the first 6 months are hard for every kid, but you are the first point of reference who would be able to say, no, I don't think this person will be able to take it, right? And they need that comfort of home for the next 3-4 years to be able to get that emotional maturity to thrive. Live anybody can. Thriving is important. So that's also very important to take into consideration. Is your child emotionally mature enough to make this change and live
Change.
the country? Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
very important point.
Yeah. I think you've also seen like these thousands of students go through the process and come
Yeah.
on the other side. What does, I mean, I don't want to say success in that typical term, but what does success after university actually look like? You know, it's not the job, I think it's also individual success. If I'm kind of reflecting on this question, I think it's individual. What is your definition of success kind of thing? But what does that success after university actually look like? And how can students position themselves for it, regardless of where they study?
Yeah.
You know,
I think the very first thing that will lead to eventual success, and I'll define success little later because I don't have
yeah,
the like thought in my mind yet. But the one thing that you can do is expose yourself, explore, spend a lot of time doing things outside the classroom that help you engage with the subject deeper, but
mm,
also the opportunities on campus and outside of campus. If you are someone who's not afraid to just keep hashing it out and saying, okay, I'll do this one volunteer position here, or I'll lead this charity cricket match here, or my mom has a cookie business, I'm going to do Instagram for her. If you spend those 3 years just simply exposing yourself and exploring other things, what's going to come out of that is a very strong data set of these are the 17 things I never want to do again in my life. I hate it. And that's amazing, right? For a 21-year-old to have that clarity is amazing because now you have a very small data set of things that you actually want to engage with. And that leads to a sense of being open minded, saying, okay, I'll apply for those many jobs. Wherever I get the first opportunity, I'll take it. Versus sitting around and waiting for a eureka moment to come to you about what am I really good at. You'll never know what you're good at until you've been out there and really gone through the grind into some other activities and see what you enjoy getting your hands dirty with. So I think that has become the one blanket advice neither I give all my students who are undergraduates, saying how much are you really putting yourself out there? And how much are you really doing and exploring and exposing yourself to things to be able to come back and give me with clarity saying, well, I want to do a master's in finance. First of all, how much you explored finance versus how much have you explored other areas to know that you want to do finance. So, but it comes with the little things, organizing a charity cricket match, attending an inter-college festival, becoming a contingent leader and finding performing artists to put up a dance show. Really putting yourself out there to really understand who you are because all of this is a journey of self-discovery. That's all that is basically. Now, what is the one parameter of success that I have noticed over 22 years of working with students, high school and college students, and young adults? They've built a very strong comfort level with failure. They have grit to bounce back. They fail, but then they'll get up and they'll put themselves out there again, knowing fully well that they might fail again. And I don't mean to say this in a very abstract, philosophical way, right? I'll give you an example. I was working with a student last year. They were from the UK university system and undergrad, and they were applying for jobs. And they were like, "Bam, I'm not getting any internships. I don't really know what to do." I said, "Okay, let's look at your approach. How are you approaching internships?" So they said, "Okay, I want to work, let's assume finance. Okay, I want to work in investment banking." Okay, so now you are in, suppose, Leeds. Make a list of the top 25 investment banks in Leeds in a 5-kilometer radius from your institution. Okay, ma'am, there are two. Okay, now let's make that 25 kilometers. Okay, ma'am, there are like two more. Okay, now what about the other 3 neighboring cities? Okay, ma'am, now I have a list of 15. Okay, now let's make a bigger circle. So now when they got a list of 40, 45 institutions, it's like, okay, now go on to the LinkedIn of each, find the HR person, send them a message. Now go on to their website, see in their jobs what is open. So you have to, for each company, you have to look at the LinkedIn for the HR person, and then you have to look at what is the current job opening. Right. Now look at the job description or the skills that they're looking for in that job opening. Look at your resume and see where are the gaps. Are you actually 85% meeting what they're looking for in this internship? If yes, put that together in the cover letter and say, as you seek somebody with X and Y skills, I have done this, and now this is your email body. We did this whole exercise. The person got 0 job offers out of those 45, but they were not shy of doing it again. And then they were not neither shy of doing it again. And they were not, but they got the message. I have to keep putting myself out there. I have to keep putting myself out there. They finally did get a job offer. They got it with some company in Malaysia. So they contacted some UK office. They said, we don't have a position, but our Malaysian company is looking for somebody. We'll check with them. So they offered her a remote position while they were in the UK. So they got an internship out of it. But the fear of failure has to be driven away. And the grit to go back to the drawing board again and again is what really makes success, no matter what your definition or subjective visualization of success is, it will happen if you're just not willing to give up on yourself.
Yeah. And I think you see that a lot with students. I see that a lot with professionals who come to me because I work with professionals, and I feel like that's the same thing. It's become the same way to apply for a job. It's not the traditional way anymore. You can't be expecting that, you just go on this site and apply for a job and you get the job. It's the same process. You have to apply to 50, 60, one will respond, maybe. So then you're basically doing it across the age group. You're training them for later in life, like you rightly started, because your dad said you can't be prepared for the rest of your life just at that point. You need to have that, and you create that in your undergrad. You create that when you're studying, as you said, in your earlier years.
I recently noticed that in a high schooler as well, where they are preparing strategically, fair enough, for some leading institutions in the world, and they are just not getting into they're not winning any essay competition. And the younger generation is so scared of failure that their response is like, I don't want to do it. I have too many things going on. And then for me to be able to build enough trust with that person to when I tell them something like, hey, I worked with another student so many years ago and they did 25 essay competitions before they won one. But that's so stupid. Why would they do 24 others? Well, that's because it taught them how to write for that 25th one, right? Like, you're not going to be a good writer for competitive essays unless you get up and you just keep doing it. And you keep doing it and you don't give up, and you didn't get the John Locke, no problem. You study for the HIR, you didn't get it. And then you keep at it and you keep at it, because all of that refines your writing process eventually to that one big high point of getting a accolade or a reward. But it's starting very young, this fear of failure and this sense of entitlement that I don't have to engage with something because then I'm not failed at it. And then that really needs to change as a mindset, where they need to get up and keep engaging.
Do you have, or do you believe in kind of university rankings? I'm sure that's important, but what do rankings tell you and what do they not tell you that matters just as much, if not more? Because everybody comes to me and says, okay, if we're going to this, the ranking is not great. So, there are places that do the ranking. So what is your opinion on that?
Rankings are basically run by private businesses, and therefore, obviously, for a very specific purpose, they're collecting that data. Whether it's QS or US News, etc., they're all private. They're all private companies, right? So they're all ranking for a purpose that suits them. But also they're ranking on different parameters, so you can't compare, right? Now, where would I actively use ranking? Neither, if I was a parent just looking at the internet, is if any universities consistently come up in the bottom few, right? Then I know that these are not institutions of caliber, and these are not places where they're potentially even giving a decent degree. It's probably just like that hypothetical campus. So I would cut out all the riffraff and say, oh, I'm getting an email by XYZ University who's giving me a direct admit. But actually that university just exists on paper, and once you get there, you're going to be scammed. Right? If at all I had to use ranking, I would see anything below 150, etc., are places which are like, okay, I'll have to really do my due diligence to see whether this is a place that actually exists in the world. Right? I cannot use ranking in all honesty to even give you a college list based for psychology. I cannot. Harvard University is ranked number 1, say, for psychology at US News. But Harvard University, for their research that they do at the PhD level, is ranked number one on US News for psychology. Does it make it a really good institution for undergrad? Sure. But Harvard is a great institution for undergrad, regardless of the major that you study. Right? So for parents to look at ranking, sometimes I feel like it just comes from that helplessness of saying, I don't know better. So I'll hang on to anything that the world can give me to feel more confident in this decision making as I guide my child.
Yeah. That's
Does
why
that-
they need you. And
Yes.
that's why they need people and not the, if you just look at it from that perspective of AI is not going to provide that information. Someone just talking to someone, because working and having that experience of working with people for so many years is going to share that,
Yes.
wisdom through this.
And start with your school counselors. School counselors are
Yes.
great people to at least bounce off some ideas, and they'll give you a
Hmm.
reality check on the profile of your child, especially academic. The next thing is that if you really want to do deep research, figure out and spend time choosing your counselor first. Who's giving you career guidance? Who's giving you educational guidance? There are so many ICs out there in the world right now. Most are really, really good in their scope of work. So spend time researching your counselors. Then trust your counselors. Right? I think that's where I would spend my energy if I was a parent thinking where to start.
Yeah. Yeah. What excites you most about the future of education, Tripti? This is a random statement if I was just to throw it out there.
What really, really excites me about the future of education is that knowingly, unknowingly, the pressure that the tech world is putting on the world of education to reinvent itself. I'm very excited to see how the old man is going to wear younger colors. Does that make sense? Like, I always imagine education to be this very old, aged, wise thing, and it's going to have to wear new colors just because it's always going to be relevant. Neither there is no doubt in my mind that all this poo poo about doing college degree important, not important. That's all really good lip service. Education is key. The brain needs a safe, structured, programmed approach to develop, and the parents are going to just calm down and start believing in it again. But education is going to have to wear younger colors, and I can't wait to see that. I'm kind of excited about that.
That's nice. And any final thoughts, Tripti, that you'd like to leave our audience with before we end?
Uh, if I had to give advice to the young, if they're the younger
Yes.
audience listening in, buddy, read, pick up anything on any device, on any platform. Just read. Your focus levels are dwindling. You're listening to YouTube podcasts on 1.2, 1.5 speed. It's not really working out for you. It's not, because we're looking at it in the admission process. I'm looking at the grades that are coming out of the transcripts. It's not working for you. The proof is now there. 5 years ago, people were like, oh, we'll see what happens to my brain. It's happened. It's getting fried. So read at a slow pace. If after 3 minutes you can't focus, that's fine. Get up, walk around, come back, read again. Read news articles, read autobiographies, read cartoons, read anime. Doesn't matter. Simply sit alone with yourself and read. And then slowly opinions will come, ideas will come, they'll start formulating, and you will now seek out more information to understand something deeper. And that's what we want. Watching podcasts is great, but nothing will help your brain grow and nourish as much as reading well.
Okay, thank you so much. Tripti, where can people follow your work or reach out to you
Ah,
and Red Pen?
yes, for sure. So my email address would be the perfect place to reach out to me. It's called tripti.singh@theredpen.in. You can also find me on Instagram on this page called From Tripti's Desk.
Mm.
That's where I'm putting out a lot of information now. Recently about scholarships because they're just opening up. But I will be talking to you all about more topics as well as time goes on.
Okay. Perfect. So we'll be sure to include these links for our viewers in the description below. Thank you so much, Tripti. This has been a great conversation and a lot of learning for me. And I'm sure it will really inspire our audience. To our viewers, we hope you found this conversation insightful. Stay tuned for more episodes of Discover You Career Journeys, where we aim to bring you inspiring stories. Thank you. At the end of each career journey, we bring you the key learnings from our conversations with our guests. From our conversation with Tripti Singh, here's what stayed with us. The US myth has finally been busted, and it has fundamentally changed how Indian families view studying abroad. When the job guarantee disappeared, parents started asking a far more important question: why am I really sending my child abroad? She also reminded us that studying abroad is neither right nor wrong. It comes down to your family's financial reality and whether your child has the emotional maturity to not just survive, but genuinely thrive outside of home. Parents with children in nursery school asking about Harvard are not planning ahead. They are operating from fear. She emphasized that a child studying 12 to 15 hours a day to score 98% has developed one skill: rote learning, not thinking, not problem solving, not creativity. On-screen addiction, her perspective was simple but powerful. It is a symptom, not the problem. Make your child's reality exciting and worth showing up for, and the screen time will automatically come down. When it comes to university rankings, Tripti's advice was clear. Use them to eliminate institutions that shouldn't be on your list, not to build it. Rankings are run by private businesses for their own purposes and cannot tell you where your child will truly thrive. She also reframed what success after university actually looks like. It's not the job your child lands on the first try. It's their comfort level with failure and their willingness to not give up on themselves. Thank you for watching this inspiring conversation on Discover You Career Journeys. If you've enjoyed this chat, hit the like button and let me know in the comments section which part of today's story inspired you most. And if you have questions about your own career or want to hear from people in a specific industry, drop those suggestions below as well. Don't forget to hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new career journey. It may just be the inspiration you were looking for. Until next time, stay happy.